Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
Show some gerrymandered districts and how this negatively represents millions of people in major cities when they can slice up inner city neighborhoods and bunch them with suburbs. All right, I want to show you a gerrymandered district. I'll show you a gerrymandered district. Let me think. What's a random gerrymandered district? Oh, how about Dan Crenshaw? You've heard of Dan Crenshaw, right? 821, ring a bell? 821, ring a bell? His district kind of looks like an eye patch. It's weird. And if you don't notice, look at this. Look at the district. It scoops up a bunch of Republicans up here in Kingswood and Humble, skirts around the outer Republican side, basically picks up Republican neighborhoods, and then it runs into downtown Houston, goes around the university, and hooks as many Democrats as they can grab while making sure that this still remains a safe Republican seat. How safe? R plus 11. That means for a Democrat to win, they have to outperform the expected results by 11 points. That means a huge national wave of 10 points. Dan Crenshaw still wouldn't lose. That's gerrymandering. So when I say gerrymandering means you can't win, that's what I'm talking about. And if you look at this district, you can't even travel in it. If you tried to drive around his district, you can't take a major highway. There's no road you can take. There's nothing connecting this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. It's basically an intersection at one point. This is a different district. This is a different district. Look at that. And the Republicans have the gall to say the Democrats are rigging the system. Look at them. They laugh at you. They lie to your fucking face and they love it. They love their hogs they can lie to. Can we watch the John Oliver episode on gerrymandering? You know what? Why not? Why not? That sounds like fun. That sounds like fun.
Democracy. Undeniable
seats to include the major black populations of Orangeburg, Columbia, and parts of Charleston, all to pack Democrat base into AD 19.
Okay, Wolfie Tyler, we'll look at, and by the way, this is everywhere. This is everywhere that Republicans have power. This is everywhere Republicans have power. Look at this district. This district sits, you see how it goes up there to grab Columbia? See how it goes down and grabs Savannah? These are all the black populations. And see how it grabs Charleston? It comes down here, scoops in. This is to pack all the Democrats into one district so that all the surrounding Republicans can win. Look at SC2. Look how it wraps around the city to make a safe Republican seat. That's how Republicans gerrymander. They did it to Florida. They do it to Louisiana. They do it to Texas. Look at Texas. Look at how they gerrymander Houston. Look how they gerrymander Houston. There's Crenshaw's district. Look at what they did. Look at all the districts that reach in and take a pie slice out of Houston. That's why when I say HR 1 is life or death for American voting and democracy at all, that's why it's important. It's the most important bill that Joe Biden might pass. You know what people remember LBJ for? Medicare and the Voting Rights Act. Joe Biden, if he actually got a pair, could go down in history the same way. As undeserving as that would be, he would have a chance.
Probably the best Greek export that doesn't have fruit at the bottom. Now, there is understandable concern at the moment about the personalities harming our democracy, but tonight let's talk about one of the major structural problems, and it's something that Democrats in particular love to complain about.
We have seen Republicans rig the system with their gerrymandering, often illegal gerrymandering.
There is gerrymandering to a fare thee well in states controlled by the Republicans.
Listen, political gerrymandering is probably one of the greatest threats to our democracy right now.
Well, slow down, that is a bit much. The greatest threat to our democracy right now is clearly whatever tweet the president has planned for Cinco de Mayo this year. We don't know yet what it'll be. We don't know which Spanish words will be misspelled, but we can assume it will be horrifying. But gerrymandering is a real problem. It's the practice of drawing voting districts in a way that creates unfair advantages for whoever happens to be drawing the lines, which does sound mundane. but the results can be significant. Gerrymandering is partly responsible for giving Republicans such an edge in the House of Representatives, because take a look at what happened in some states where they drew the district lines.
In Pennsylvania, 44% of the voters chose Democratic candidates for the House of Representatives in 2014. But 13 of the 18 districts, more than 2/3, are represented by Republicans. In Ohio, about...
Now that changed, chat, because of advocacy that I had a small part of. The Pennsylvania Democrats were able to take the state Supreme Court. You remember how people talk about, one of the things people say about me is they're like, Mike said he was a lawyer and he was thrown off the ballot. Well, that is not true. What happened was I had a petition challenge and I ended up winning the Democratic primary anyway through a write-in. Mike, you won a race as a write-in candidate? Yes, I did. Suck my dick, Republican Party. I'm one of the very few people in the world that can say they won an election by a write-in. Anyway, and how did I do that? Well, I had the endorsements of Planned Parenthood. I had the endorsement of the AFL-CIO. I had the endorsement of Sierra Club, an endorsement of Keystone Progress, which is the left-wing organization in Pennsylvania. I was supported by everybody. And one of the funny addendums to that is the Supreme Court that fucked me over, but ultimately didn't matter. I was off the ballot for a week, literally. They all had to resign because they were sending racial slurs and bestiality porn to prosecutors. Literally, the judges who voted against me had to be thrown off of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And then there was a massive election. I want to show you this. There was the 2015 Pennsylvania State Supreme Court election. And the three candidates I support, David Wecht, massive union supporting Democrat out of Pittsburgh, Christine Donahue, and Kevin Doherty out of Philadelphia, another big labor guy. They won the 3 open seats. And all those motherfuckers who voted against me got tossed the fuck out. And the Democrats took control of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So when we go back to this map, you know what happened to that map? The new Democratic majority on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out that gerrymander. And they drew, so it went from this shithole to this. So it was...
of the 18 districts, more than 2/3.
Look at what happened in some states where they drew the district line.
In Pennsylvania, 44% of the voters chose Democratic candidates for the House of Representatives in 2014. But 13 of the 18 districts.
It went from 5 to 13 to 9-9. Democrats won the 4th district, the 2nd district, the 3rd district, the 5th district, the 6th district, the 7th district, the 8th district, the 18th district, and the 17th district. So they went from 4 to 9. They gained 5 seats just from fair maps. And that was due to the help of those Pennsylvania Supreme Court elections that I was a small part in helping that happen. Pennsylvania voters filled 3 vacancies on the PA Supreme Court. 2 vacancies were created by retirements, and 1 vacancy created by an incumbent's primary loss. That what happened. 1 open seat was a result of the retirement of Chief Justice Ronald Castile. In May 2013, Justice Joan Orr of Melvin resigned after a conviction for campaign corruption. The second resignation occurred in 2014 when Justice Seamus P. McCaffrey left the court due to both of his implication in an FBI investigation and the exchange of referral fees between his wife and several law firms, and his involvement in a scandal wherein sexually explicit emails were forwarded from his private personal email account to court employees. There was also racist shit. That also was Ronald Castile, too. All those motherfuckers got yeeted, and I was happy to help replace them with 3 solid judges. Just a little background in case you ever want to know why, Mike, what happened with that Supreme Court case? Well, there was evil motherfuckers who eventually immediately got yeeted. It seems like someone, when they fuck with me, they have like bad karma. I don't know what that is. I just guess I've been lucky.
More than 2/3 are represented by Republicans. In Ohio, about 40% of the voters chose Democratic candidates for the House of Representatives, but 12 out of 16 seats, 3/4 of them...
Do you think redistricting is a sound strategy in the long run, given how often the state ledge turns over and how the right is much more active in funding gerrymandering effort every census year? Is this possible as a multi-state national strategy? That's why House Resolution 1 is so important. It doesn't allow the Republicans to redistrict anymore and gerrymander anymore. Look at Ohio.
Represented by Republicans.
Those numbers are way out of proportion to what people should expect. You wouldn't accept Neapolitan ice cream that was 75% strawberry. How is that okay? What perverts voted for this? So whoever draws the districts has a lot of power.
Thank you,
and thanks to
Morgellion, for the 17
technological
months.
advances, it's possible to use that power in very precise ways.
In the age of computers, You can gerrymander with scientific precision. You can run in and out of alleys and up and down streets and carefully include and exclude whichever voters you want in one district and not in another. So it's become a very precise science.
He's right about that. Gerrymandering has become a very precise science, and interestingly, it's one of the few remaining types of science in which the Republican Party currently believes. Now, there are different reasons politicians engage in gerrymandering. It's done to disadvantage voters based on race, or on political party, or to shore up seats for incumbents, sometimes even within a party. Take Hakeem Jeffries. In 2000, he ran...
This is Nancy Pelosi's heir apparent, AOC's biggest enemy in New York.
A strong challenge in a Democratic primary for the New York State Assembly, and he planned to run again in 2002. But the Democrats had done something interesting to the map.
The map that was drawn was absolutely fascinating. They drew a map that literally carved out the block on which Hakeem Jeffries lived from Assembly District 57.
I remember shaking my head in disbelief. There were a lot of people hoping to vote for me, but were surprised to find that they no longer lived in the Assembly District that they had been living in for years, if not decades. Brooklyn politics can be pretty rough, but that move was gangster.
Yeah, it was gangster. And remember, the threshold for gangster in Brooklyn is the notorious B.I.G., whose debut album begins with songs that are respectively about armed robbery, gun violence, armed robbery and gun violence, and being prepared to die by gun violence while committing armed robbery. And this is by no means a new problem. Even the term gerrymandering goes back centuries.
It gets its name from a 19th century politician named Elbridge Gerry. As governor of Massachusetts, he helped shape a congressional district so blatantly one-sided that one critic said it looked like a salamander. No, another replied, a gerrymander.
Now, that counted as a joke in 1810, back when your entertainment options were sunsets, Washington Irving novels, and getting kicked by a horse. And quick side note, you are not wrong to notice that the Jerry in gerrymander refers to a guy whose name was actually pronounced Gerry, because literally everything about gerrymandering is stupid and wrong. And look, there is nothing inherently wrong with redrawing a voting district. It's actually necessary. They need to have around the same number of people in them, and populations shift over time as people move or die or emigrate to America because their stand-up careers have endured what might be best characterised as a pogrom of indifference. And that is why every 10 years we have a census, after which lines are redrawn for both the US House and state legislatures.
That's a good joke.
The problem is, in most states, the lines are drawn by politicians. In fact, in 37 states, the drawing of state legislative districts is primarily controlled by the legislators themselves. And they have a pretty clear vested interest there. And if you think that seems crazy, you're not alone.
Every fall, I speak to 5 or 6 members of the British Parliament that come over to shadow members of Congress. And one of the things I have to explain to them is, here's how you get elected to the House. I see these shocked looks on these British faces, and one time one stood up and said, well, that's terrible. That's not the voters choosing their representatives, that's the representatives choosing their voters.
First, that's racist. and second, even I find it difficult hearing advice on map drawing in a British accent that once said, I don't see why one scrap of dust is any different from another, so I ended the border here because that's where my pen ran out of ink. They'll learn to like it. What's the worst that can happen? But it is true that if your party holds the redistricting pen, it wields substantial power, and there are multiple techniques at its disposal.
There are a couple of ways that you can reapportion people and put them into districts.
Packing and cracking.
There's a thing called packing and there's a thing called cracking.
Yes, packing and cracking. Not to be confused with the teen drug trend of cracking and packing, which is when the teens hollow out a cucumber, fill it with crack, and put it in their anus to absorb it faster. I saw it on the local news, which means it's real, and every teenager is doing it right now. But in this context, packing means cramming as many opposition voters as possible into just a few districts, and cracking means spreading them out thinly over a bunch of districts so they can't gain a majority in any one of them. Either way, it dilutes their impact. Try and think of it as table assignments at a wedding. You can either break up your 8 awful relatives and spread them out over different tables, or you can pack them all together in one insufferable table of the damned. The Washington Post showed how this can work. Look at this hypothetical state. It's 60% blue voters, 40% red, and it needs to be carved up into 5 districts. Now, proportionally, you would want 3 blue and 2 red districts. But if you draw the lines like this, you can get 3 red majorities and 2 blues. And if you draw it like this, you can get 5 blue majorities and no red. And if you draw lines like this, it looks like a dick, which is irrelevant to this discussion, but it is objectively very funny. And if you are thinking, shouldn't all of this be illegal? Well, that's complicated, because if you're gerrymandering to disadvantage minorities, yes, that is illegal under the Voting Rights Act. But if you're gerrymandering to disadvantage voters of an opposing party, that has generally been allowed. So racial gerrymandering? No. Partisan gerrymandering? That's kind of okay. And it's led politicians to be pretty
Physics Animal, thanks for the sub and the kind words,
like in North Carolina last year. Their congressional map was thrown out in federal courts for racial gerrymandering, which is wrong. So they had to redraw. And while doing it, State Rep David Lewis went out of his way to explain that the new map would not illegally fuck over minorities, it would just legally fuck over Democrats.
We want to make clear that we, to the extent, are going to use political data in drawing this map, it is to gain partisan advantage on the map. I want that criteria to be clearly stated and understood.
I need you to understand, this is not a race thing, because it can't be. We just want a map that churns out Republicans like it's Ann Romney. That is all we're saying. That is all we are saying here. Please let me understand.
Jesus Christ.
And that map worked. In 2016, despite Republicans winning just over half the votes in House races, they wound up controlling 77% of the state seats. That is a more...
By the way, that's why Republicans have a chance of winning power in America. Now do you start to understand why I'm so insanely focused on H.R. 1? It does a whole bunch of amazing things that not only helps Democrats, it helps the left wing of the Democratic Party. It hurts the corporate Democrats. It helps the left wing, because corporate Democrats, they gerrymander in favor of their friends. If you take the pen out of their hands, it helps. Then they just create fair districts. That lowers the power of all machines, all establishment politicians. This doesn't just help Democrats, it helps left-wing grassroots Democrats. So, and gets people that actually, I don't know, care about you, at least a shot. How do you keep hope? Republicans are evil, Democrats don't seem to care. It seems hopeless. Democrats just did one good thing. We're explaining the one good thing. The Democrats just did the one good thing. I'm focusing on the one good thing right now. Let's focus on that. What, did I close everything that had to do with this? Here it is. House passes sweeping election bill that would counter GOP efforts to restrict voter access. And it does way more than that.
Still need to be able to.
Way more than that. It's exciting shit.
Blatant disregard for what people want than the arsehole who gives out Bazooka Joe on Halloween. Oh, great. Gun from the Roosevelt administration wrapped in a comic from the other Roosevelt administration. At least the guy handing out Snickers stuffed with razor blades actually gives...
There's something so well, here's the problem. The Democrats are getting fucked. The Democrats are getting fucked because the Republicans did so well with gerrymandered state legislative districts that they're going to draw these Democrats out of power. So if the Democrats have to give up some of their power in order to maintain power overall, they might calculate that that's a good thing. And they already did it out of the House. The question is, will it pass out of the Senate? And here's the thing about the Senate. You can't gerrymander the Senate. It's just states. So it's not as important for them. I mean, they're just affected by the voter suppression.
Gives you a Snickers. And Republicans elevated this technique to an art form with a plan called Red Map, or the Redistricting Majority Project. They poured more than $30 million into state-level races ahead of the last redistricting, gaining huge numbers of seats, and that paid massive dividends.
When Republicans won the majority of state houses in 2010, it ensured they'd be redrawing the maps in those states. And lo and behold, it paid off in 2012. Nationwide, Democrats running for Congress got 1.1 million more votes, but Republicans sent 33 more members to the House.
Exactly. So the maps they drew put Democrats at a significant disadvantage. It's like if, instead of Tim Duncan, the San Antonio Spurs had to use Tim Burton. It's not technically impossible to win, but it's going to be much, much harder. And look, to some extent, Republicans got lucky because 2010 was a wave election for their party. And I'm not saying Democrats are angels here, by no means. When they have had control, they have gerrymandered the shit out of districts in states like Maryland. And they've been pretty brazen too. Take Illinois. In 2001, the Democrats won the right to redistrict there after, and this is for reasons too complicated and too stupid to explain, a name was pulled out of a replica of Abraham Lincoln's stove by Pat. But just watch as one Democratic lawmaker made the least convincing promise ever.
Well, we'll sit down and draw a very fair map.
Come on! That's an inherently suspicious look on his face. That's the exact expression of someone who just urinated in a public pool. Water's warm today, huh? Enjoy your swim. So how do you know if your district has been...
And by the way, this is the type of Democrats we used to have. Vince DeMuzzi. Vince DeMuzzi. Oh, we're gonna make sure those Republicans get buried, baby. That's a Vince DeMuzzi. We need more of these guys. Where is our fucking dirtbag guys trying to rig elections for our side? Well, they're fucking losers now. So the best we can do is fair maps. Vince DeMuzzi. Vince, well, are they gonna draw a fair map?
Convincing promise ever.
Well, we'll sit down and draw a very fair map.
Come on.
Beanie!
Come on. That's an inherently suspicious look on his face. That's the exact expression of someone who just urinated in a public pool. Water's warm today, huh? Enjoy your swim. So how do you know if your district has been drawn with nefarious intent? Well, that's tricky, because too often people will just lazily point to districts that have a weird shape.
North Carolina's 12th district looks like spilled coffee. Pennsylvania's 16th is flexing its muscles. And one commentator compared Maryland's 3rd to a broken-winged pterodactyl. And then there's this. They call it the earmuffs.
Ah, yes, an earmuff district. Not to be confused with the earmuff district, which is a one-block area of Manhattan where sketchy men sell accessories made from the fur of endangered species. You should go, you should visit. But while it is tempting to see something suspicious in an odd-shaped district, there is a pretty good argument against prioritising tidy lines above all else.
Dropping a bunch of squares seems fair. It seems like if you could just draw a grid, like Tron, that you could put people into districts and there wouldn't be any sort of manipulation in the process. But Americans don't live, with the exception of Montana and a few other square places, Americans don't live in squares. Our communities are irregular and random.
Yeah, that's true. American communities are not square. They're like jazz music. They're free-form, free-flowing, and they contain a troubling amount of opioids. And there is no one right way to draw a district. Reasonable people will disagree. Some might prioritise a district being politically competitive. Others might favour compactness. Others want to keep so-called communities of interest together. The problem is, it may be physically impossible to do all three of those things in one place. In fact, take that earmuff district. The thin line connecting the two halves is just a single road, and people love to make fun of that.
In Chicago, squeezed between two freeways, this narrow strip is needed to connect two halves of a gerrymandered district to keep it contiguous, as is required.
This is the way Congress gets around the contiguous rule, because there's obviously nobody living here. I mean, unless they're homeless people, I guess. Anybody here? Any congressional voters out there?
Now, you may laugh, but a few seconds later, an entire ghost baseball team from the early 1900s walked out of the tall grass and beat him to death with their ghost bats. And he kind of deserved it. But here is the thing, though. It is drawn like earmuffs for good reasons, because the northern and southern parts are two Latino communities, and the district in the middle is predominantly African American. Now, both are Democratic, so it's not about partisan advantage, it's about ensuring that both communities have representatives serving their interests. And it's criticised a lot, but redistricting experts absolutely love it. In fact, 2 of them actually put it on their wedding cake. That is a real wedding cake. And I'm guessing that the bachelorette party cake was something like one more night of packing and cracking. So to break it down, not all weird-shaped districts are bad, and not all normal-shaped districts are good. And there is one...
So the original Voting Rights Act requires what's known as minority-majority districts. Back in the day, people were really racist, and they wouldn't vote for a black candidate. White voters wouldn't vote for a black candidate pretty much ever. So they created in the Voting Rights Act under LBJ that some districts would have to be intentionally created so that black people and Hispanic people would actually get representatives in Congress. It was a progressive reform at the time. Now, it seems like Democratic voters are pretty happy to vote for people of color. It doesn't seem like it matters actually to them. Republicans are still racist. But for the Democratic Party, and that's where you get mostly, you know, people of color from, is Democratic districts or districts that are purple. For example, Ilhan Omar, she represents a district I think is 60% white. So I tend to think that the majority districts are no longer needed, and we should be drawing things to be more proportionally fair. And I think that black representation wouldn't fall, because the key to getting more people of color in Congress is quite frankly to elect more left-wing candidates. And the Republican Party is pretty much the party of whiteness. So if you want more people of color, it's probably better if we have, say, like 3 districts that are D+5 as opposed to 2 districts that are D+20 and 1 Republican district. You're more likely to get 3 people of color out of those 3 districts than you are to get, that's my personal opinion. I'm pretty much against racial gerrymandering, even for positive reasons. Now, I'd be persuaded to be my mind changed on this position. It's just my study of it I seem to think that this is actually used by Republicans to gerrymander more, and they'll say, we're not gerrymandering, we're creating a minority-majority district. So I think it diminishes the power of people of color by packing them. That's like my argument anyway.
One more thing, gerrymandering is not the sole reason for the mismatch between our popular vote percentages and our representation. Some of that is due to where Democrats choose to live.
Democrats live in the wrong places, basically. Yeah. They've decided to cram themselves in cities, and that just makes it...
This is false. Now, there is technically a small geographic advantage that Republicans do have, but it's more like 1 or 2%. And gerrymandering is like an additional 10%. So if we got rid of gerrymandering, Republicans would have a small geographic advantage as opposed to the massive out-of-control advantage they have now.
Really hard to have a winning coalition when your people do that. If you're college educated, if you want to work in the creative economy, you move to a city, and those places have enough Democrats already. Democrats need to make places like Des Moines or Columbus or Raleigh, North Carolina,
by Silly Billy.
cool,
Thank you, bud.
so that those young people move there, but that's kind of outside the typical realm of political strategy.
Wait, what do you mean, make Des Moines cool? They've already got the Des Moines Heritage Carousel, the most badass balls-to-the-wall carousel in the whole Midwest. And yes, according to their website, it is closed for the season of spring, which is not a good time for carousels. But when May 28th rolls around, it's going to be an all-out carousel fuckstravaganza until 8 p.m. But it is true. Democrats are basically packing themselves into districts, and that is not likely to change anytime soon. But there is a broader, non-partisan point here, and that is that in a democracy, the question of who gets to draw the map should not have as much significance as it currently does. Now, there is actually a Supreme Court case coming up involving a redistricting in Wisconsin that was so partisan, a lower court struck their maps down, and the Supreme Court may, for the first time, actually issue a clear ruling putting limits on partisan gerrymandering. So all of our hopes are now in the delicious claws of Justice Neil Gorsuch. But even without a ruling...
Spoiler, they ruled that political gerrymandering is okay. The Supreme Court refused to make it illegal. So, yeah. They said it was okay.
Many experts argue we should simply be taking redistricting out of the hands of politicians and give the task to independent commission. And that's a pretty good idea. In fact, a handful of states already do some version of that. And it's not perfect. It is tough to completely remove partisan biases, a fact that one state lawmaker brought up to shoot the idea down.
If I felt there were any way in the world that I could stand before my constituents and say, I believe that it's possible to come up with a group of people who have no political bias whatsoever, who will simply sit down in a room and magically create districts, I'd be behind it. I'd be behind it.
Liar! He's a Weasley little liar, dude.
I did 100%, but those people don't exist.
Now, if you recognise that guy, it's because you saw him about 10 minutes ago reassuring everyone that his intent in drawing districts was to gain partisan advantage for Republicans. So he's essentially arguing, nobody's unbiased, so let's use me, the most brazenly biased man in the universe. Which is pretty much arguing, no babysitter is perfect, so let's just use Slender Man. But while independent commissions might not be perfect, they would definitely be better. And the truth is, it is hard to come up with a worse system than the one most states currently have. And there is something very important at stake here. Lawmakers should not be allowed to dilute our votes by drawing their own lines and essentially picking their own voters. And you know what? I will tell you why. The foundations of democracy are built on the idea that everybody's vote should count equally. Everybody's. That is what America is all about. That every one of us should get an equal chance to make a bad decision which fucks things up for everybody else. Whoever we are, however poor our decisions, whether you are a juggalo, stop it, or a 47-year-old Quidditch player.
It's a sport!
Or someone who bought that stupid $6,000 jacket I wore on the show last week. It's horrible. Our voices should be fully heard, even if we're Scientologists, or parrot heads, or guys who ride unicycles as their primary mode of transportation. In this one context, we should all be relevant, regardless of our questionable life choices. Whether you're an EDM bro, or a guy jamming a knife into a toaster, or a Washington Redskins fan, or even a Jill Stein supporter.
She would have won.
How would she have won? What process could she have used to... The point is, her voice should count as much as anyone else's, as much as a guy in a fedora, or a baker of erotic pastries, or a SantaCon attendee, or everyone's racist grandma. Don't say anything. Because at the end of the day, that is the point of this country. That's what made America great. Because think about it. Election results should not be the fault of lawmakers' crazy lines. They should be the result of our own crazy decisions. Am I right? Am I right?
All right, that was a pretty good video. I think that was pretty informative, chat. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy, the morning politics guy, Politics Frogs, in every single day, same time, 10 a.m., day in, day out, and we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You gotta follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid, and you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.